All right, guys. My name is Jamie. I'm here with Recovery Inspired Hope, Jamie Tall. We are waiting for Michael Crouch to come in. We're really excited. He is the co-host of the Addicted Podcast. The Addictive Podcast, and he is just such an amazing guy. Just had a new baby, so super excited for him to come on. Here we go. All right. Hey guys, it's Jamie bringing you Recovery Inspired Hope, and we have my very good friend here, Michael Crouch. So excited to have you on tonight. Michael just had a baby. This is so exciting. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about your background, about your new baby.
I don't know where to start, I guess. So I'm Michael Crouch. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I've been in recovery from substance use and other mental health conditions since 2013, January 2013. I'm currently a certified peer recovery specialist. I work in South Carolina in Pickens County. I do some other harm reduction stuff with Challenges, Inc., and I have a podcast that's called the Addictive Podcast, which you can Google and find pretty easy. My son, Lane Matthew Crouch, was born on July 1st, which was last Wednesday. That's definitely a gift of recovery. I was married the third week of May, so that's another gift of recovery. And, that's kind of like a short little bio of who I am and kind of what I'm doing right now.
Awesome. So I already had talked a little bit about the Addictive Podcast before you came on. So Tell me, how did this start?
Okay, so my friend Mark Burrows, who he is the owner of Carolina Wellness and Recovery, which is an outpatient opioid treatment facility. They do Suboxone and Vivitrol. And he also is the founder of the first syringe service / harm reduction organization in South Carolina. If you're in the upstate and you need sterile syringes or some naloxone, some other harm reduction items, you can reach out to Challenges, Inc. and get those things. So he already purchased the podcast or took it over from somebody. And they were like kind of like the people that did it before us were kind of like harm reduction, drug policy alliance type people. They're very I would go back. You can go back and listen to there. But anyway, we took it over for them, and we just kind of started doing our thing and switched it up to give it a little feel of upstate South Carolina and that type of stuff.
Nice. So you said you've been in recovery since 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about what it was that put you in that position where you decided to do something different.
Yeah. So, and I almost don't even like saying 2013 because I feel like it was a process to get to that place. But, from like the late 90s to like 2007, my addiction was at a really bad place, with multiple substances and different stuff. And around 2008, I actually got involved in a methadone program, and that stabilized me a lot. I didn't, and that brought me out of a really bad place, and I was able to get a driver's license, and I was able to go back to college and take a few courses. I was able to go to work, and not spend all my money when I got paid. So that kind of brought me out of the depths of addiction, and then I slid back and started using some Xanaxes and stuff, some non-prescribed medication, and drinking a little bit and doing some things. But I never went back to that place. So then in 2013, I went to detox to get off the Xanaxes and I stopped drinking and doing other things during that time period, but mostly that I feel like I'd gotten well and then slipped back a little bit. And then in 2013, I had a 4-bar a day Xanax habit. So I knew that couldn't last forever. So I was like, eventually I thought about it, and I finally went to detox. And because I had kind of straightened up a little bit, and gotten my life together, I knew that I kind of knew what I wanted to do moving forward. So by then I had tapered off the methadone. I hadn't really used opiates much since then. So after that, I was kind of abstinent, and that was what my recovery went from there.
So I love how you were talking before about the syringe exchange, because I'm about to do a collaboration with someone on Saturday from Fort Myers, Florida, who says that he said that they don't have that there.
Yeah, and we don't really have it here much. Like, it's not like in other states. I think maybe Georgia, I'm not sure, North Carolina. Like in North Carolina, the health department does it. West Virginia is another place I'm familiar with. The health department does it. And here we kind of just do it. We kind of just raise money and people donate to us, and we kind of do it on our own. Mark probably does more of the hand-to-hand stuff. I'm kind of more of an outreach person, and I'm on the board. He does it along with his business that he has. So I'm not really I don't really have the time. I would love to do it, because I like that. But he does more of the actual hand-to-hand work that's involved in it. But it's just, for me, I came into recovery and I viewed stuff like that as enabling. I viewed it as keeping people from hitting rock bottom. When I got educated on what syringe services actually is, and what it does is people, and harm reduction is not really to get people into treatment, but people that are involved in syringe service programs are 5 times more likely to seek help and 3 times more likely to stop using. And
I love that.
And I don't have the research people. If somebody wants to message me later, I can give you the source. But every dollar invested in syringe services saves medical expenses $7 and something. If you think about a patient that contracts HIV or something, that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely.
When it buy a 10-cent syringe.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you talk about so many different topics on your podcast.
Yeah.
What are some topics that you think that are not openly discussed in recovery that you think should be talked about more?
One would be people don't realize it, but in America, we have a system of mass incarceration where we have 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's incarcerated people. And a lot of those people are people that use drugs, and since the 70s and the 80s, we have locked people up. It's contradictory because our government and our government providers and authorities on addiction treatment, we call it a disease. Our government calls addiction a disease or a brain disorder. But then at the same time, we treat possession as a criminal offense, and I don't think people understand the barriers that, that causes and how it's not really helpful. Laws are made to control behavior. Laws aren't really made to help change behavior. So I don't think people realize what has happened over the last 100 years. I'm not here for pro drug use, but I am here for pro drug users, and over we have criminalized something over the last 100 years based on a lot. You can go back and research it yourself and look at why these laws were created and how they were reinforced during the 1970s and 80s and how much they harm people and how much of a barrier they are for people to find recovery.
Yes, I remember you talking about this with my friend Kirsten Lester. You did a video with her on that, didn't you?
We did, yeah. And hers is a perfect example because she wasn't a kingpin dealer. She got caught up in the lifestyle, and it seemed to me, based on what she told me, they weren't really willing. They wanted to punish her, and they gave her, I think, 5 years, and that's the oxymoron, if that's the right terminology, that we define addiction as compulsive use despite negative consequences, but then we try to use negative consequences to help to like kind of force people into change, and there's, and she's a trauma victim and she talks about her story and stuff, but you take somebody that's been abused and hurt their whole life and put them in a system where it's going to do nothing but activate your trauma. We can say whatever we want to, but like there's no way to look at the criminal justice system. And I'm not advocating that that if somebody can rob somebody or harm somebody, that those consequences, people need to face consequences if you hurt another person. But there are states that have programs where if you get caught with a bag of heroin, they take you to treatment and not jail. And I think if people understood and kind of researched how much of a barrier that is for people getting well, like they would be outraged. And it costs citizens it costs a lot of money to keep people incarcerated,
Absolutely. Yeah. And they have, people, when you get arrested, they try to get you to the cops try to get you to work with them and stuff. It's like they're using your your disease for their own benefit. Like they're never like, oh, hey, do you need some help? But, oh, hey, why don't you tell on 10 of your friends? And you're still going to get in trouble.
Which is dangerous because I don't think they understand, the dangers that comes with telling on somebody. And I've seen people during my active addiction where the police would they would pay a guy to go tell on a few people, and then he would take that money to a different town and go buy drugs. And then when he needed some more drugs, he would go back and the police would pay him to go tell on more people. And that was helping pay for his drug use.
Yeah, it's sick. That's sick. And they don't ever get in trouble. The cops, they got all the supply.
Yeah. And my experience is a lot of law enforcement don't love the laws that are in place for substance use. That they found a job they want to do. And this probation and all these different systems that are in place. People aren't fans of the law. They just work in that system and they get caught up and they know it doesn't work.
We do have some really great allies in Athens. We've got a really great community, where we're so blessed in Athens. I mean, we have the probation officer, we have the DA, we have the judge, we have the state representatives who are all for recovery. So Athens is such a different place. Mm-hmm. And it's like we all work together for the treatment of substance use disorder, and we all promote recovery. Do you guys have it like that in South Carolina?
I would say we're behind Georgia for sure. I think they try. I just don't think a lot of people don't understand stigma and that part of it. So we have a lot of billboards up here that say opioid addiction and where you can get treatment. And we have these campaigns for opioid addiction, but nobody ever talks about recovery. I love when I come to Georgia and it says Georgia Recovers and they got those new license plates.
Yes.
You can see people on billboards, and we just haven't got to that place, and I hope that one day that we understand that it's important to educate the public, but mm-hmm. the public gets on board when they see people recover. I was in the hospital when my baby was born. One of the medical providers came in and she was asking questions with us. They asked, is there a history of depression? Is there a history of anxiety? Is there a history of substance misuse? And my wife said, my husband's in long-term recovery. And the medical provider was like, well, what does that mean? And then she explained that he has used alcohol or other drugs and however many years. And the medical provider was like, well, I don't hear that. You don't hear that about many people. So there's a disconnect because statistically there's just as many people in long-term recovery as there are in active use. It's about 23 million or something. Uh-huh. If you give it severe use, and the general public doesn't see that. And I think that's another thing we don't talk about in recovery is the media, the media, you can look in the newspaper and it shows drug bust and meth bust and all these different things, but there's no follow-up story when all these people that you just put on the front page of the paper for selling meth, or whatever, you don't do the follow-up when they find recovery, because most people, if they live, most people eventually find recovery, maybe 10, 20 years later, whatever. Like, most people figure it out one way or another. We don't do follow-up and the media just blitzes us with like meth lab blows up, drug bust over here, and like all this different stuff. But there's no promotion of recovery. So we're like in a never ending battle because the general public doesn't know, and a lot of people are still ashamed to say they're in recovery. And then there's a lot of people that don't even call it recovery. About 46% statistically are just people that figured it out one way or another. And they're technically in recovery, but they don't call it that. So it's a battle, because people don't understand recovery as possible because they don't get to see it most of the time.
Yes, well, because they don't know what they're looking for. Because when we get into recovery, when we get to that place, we just blend in with everybody else. We're picking up our kid in the car line right next to you. We might be your bosses, we might be who you're listening to on the radio, we might be your massage therapist. Like, you just don't know. It's almost like we kind of disappear when we get well, and that's why I love what you do. And why I'm so passionate about speaking out about recovery. I always say, when I lost my anonymity, my chains of guilt and shame were broken. Yeah. And I was empowered to be able to share hope with people. And I think that's just,
All right, go ahead.
I just think that's so amazing how you do the radio and everything, and like you're out there and you're putting yourself out there like, look, this is what recovery looks like.
Yeah. And so what's interesting about that is my first 5 years in recovery, I was an anonymous recovery pathway, and that was my pathway. But even though I was anonymous, I was super involved in a 12-step program. And like, I would go to conventions all over the Southeast, and like, I would be in, that's why I know so many people in Georgia, because I've traveled so much in that underground world, meeting people. But all the while I was doing that, I was working in this hospital system and developing this life and meeting people. But most people didn't know I was in recovery unless they like found it on Facebook or something. I didn't tell people. So I lived in shame really for like 5 years. And what forced me to come out of that is that I got a job as a peer recovery specialist. So then it was like, okay, I had to start telling people. And I really felt a lot of shame then, because I hadn't been trained. I hadn't been certified. I didn't know like how to speak in a way that made me feel good about myself. I was Michael, I'm an addict, and there's not, for me, that didn't make me feel good about myself, other than just maybe to identify with a small group of people. So it was hard, I was like thrust out of that shame and that, hiding who I was. And it was traumatic almost.
Yes, I get it. I feel like the restoration portion of my life didn't happen until I dropped, stopped being ashamed and feeling guilty. And then it was like, I felt like redeemed almost, if that makes sense. So what advice would you give to a person who's considering coming into recovery?
I would tell them, if it's available, to figure out what's going to work for you, and that it's hard to say advice. Like, there's some, I would go to a place where you're going to be around people that are going to let you figure out what's going to work best for you, because there's multiple pathways to recovery, and every environment's not going to support that. And then if you choose a specific pathway, that's okay. But coming into recovery, I like the concept of whatever, whether that's the RCO or or a therapist or something, but just find you a place to go to figure out what's going to work for you. And that might not last long. You can go to RCO and you might meet some people that go to NA or AA or maybe Celebrate Recovery or Smart Recovery or Refuge Recovery, and then those people can kind of guide you in there, but again, that some people just go straight to a certain program, so it just depends, but I'm a big advocate on allowing people to develop their own pathway and figure out what's going to work best for them, because I've learned by working in this field that, you can put somebody in treatment, or you can force somebody to go to a group or that kind of stuff. And, they may be a trauma victim and they may just do whatever you tell them to do, but that doesn't mean they're buying into recovery. And I want people to buy into recovery. And if it's not theirs and they don't get to create it on their own, it's there's a high probability that it's not going to be long lasting change. People return to use sometimes after long periods, which statistically doesn't usually happen after 5 years, but people do that because I believe, they haven't been given the opportunity to develop the pathway and choose recovery for themselves.
Yes, totally agree with you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael. This was such an awesome interview. I feel like we might have a part 2 of this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just let me know. I'm kind of tired. I've been in the hospital for several days waiting on him to be. I'm still trying to recharge after sleeping on a hospital couch for 3 or 4 days.
I know. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Michael Crouch, you guys. So excited. The Addictive Podcast. Awesome. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.